Okay, let's see. Actually, Marie, I'm just adding you back in. I want to confirm that you can hear my voice right now.
Yes, I can.
Oh, perfect. Thank you. Okay. Hi, everyone joining the Art Gallery of Regina. For Still Life Sunday on February 27th over Facebook Live and YouTube Live. And if you want to have the option to join our screen and show your sketchbook to the camera and just speak over the voice, not type in the chat, please go ahead. You should have received an email from me a few days ago, as well as one just about 10 minutes ago that gives you something called a StreamYard link, and that's how you can have your video and your audio included in the stream. Be aware that if you do use the StreamYard link, this live video will also be available after the fact. And I know that some people cannot make it to our Still Life Sunday today. So we're really excited to be able to offer you the option to participate in Still Life Sunday after the fact. This is something that the Art Gallery of Regina has been doing for a little over a year now. The last Sunday of every month from 2 to 4 p.m. We ask people to gather together safely online and draw together an opportunity to spend your time together productively drawing and socializing. And yes, our Zoom account is being used for other purposes at the Art Gallery today. So I've asked you to join me through these other methods. And you can also see our live video right on the front page of the Art Gallery of Regina's webpage today as well, www.artgalleryofregina.ca. And up there on the screen right now, I have some of the links where our Facebook live video and YouTube live video are. So please feel free to click those, join us any way you wish. And finally, I want to acknowledge that although we are meeting digitally, I'm joining you from the traditional lands referred to as Treaty 4 territory. The city of Regina is located on Treaty 4 territories, the original lands of the Cree, Ojibwe, Saulteaux, Dakota, Nakota, Lakota, and the homeland of the Métis Nation. Today, these lands continue to be a shared territory of many diverse peoples. It is important to recognize that we all have benefits and responsibilities under treaty agreements. I also want to recognize that some people may be joining us from other treaty territories, from Indigenous lands or unceded lands, and that we are committed to acknowledging the harms and mistakes of the past and committed to moving forward in partnership with Indigenous and First Nations peoples in the spirits of reconciliation and consideration. All right, so we had a request from one of our Still Life Sunday participants to focus on value. So that is what I'm going to walk you through today. And as I mentioned in my email, this isn't a drawing class. It's more of a collegial sharing. I'm just going to share a few things with you, and we'll all work through this together. And I'm going to remove this image here. There we go. So what you should be seeing on screen now is our jar, a single jar. I'm just going to move a little bit more light onto it. And this is what we will start out drawing today. Actually, before we even start drawing the jar, though, what I would like to do is to have everyone make a value scale. So I'm going to pop mine in front of our main camera here. And I'll actually show this in my other feed. There we go. Okay, so what I recommend that everyone start by doing is making a couple of, 3 value scales. And I've just taken my ruler actually and traced my ruler 3 times on the page and then divided that up into 8 boxes. And you will start by leaving the left-hand box blank. The paper should be the lightest value or the highlight, and or the lightest tint. And then the right-hand box should you should color in the darkest with whatever drawing media you are using. And then try and get a smooth gradation, distinct tone, a distinct variation of values through all of the intervening boxes. And I've used just an HB pencil actually for everything, and I've blended it with my finger. One thing that I also recommend when you're doing this, especially if you're using pencil, but maybe also charcoal or anything else where your hand could drag across the paper, and not only will your hand get dirty, but you'll be pushing that pigment into your paper, is to take a piece of copy paper or some other kind of paper that is, low tooth, and to use that to rest your hand on while you're coloring in, so that way you're not going to smudge the rest of your paper. So I'm going to give everyone, I don't know, maybe 2 minutes, but Marie, since you're in my studio here, I'll ask you to give me a little wave when you're done. There's also a private chat screen for us here, so hopefully you can see the chat button if you want me to put you on screen, so you can show or talk. You can let me know about that as well. Okay, and if anyone is joining us through the Facebook Live or the YouTube Live, I'll be monitoring the chat in both of those forums as well. So if there's some message you want to communicate to me, just pop it into our chat there, and I will respond as I see it. And as I mentioned, you should have received an email from me about 8 minutes before 2 today. And if you want to come into the studio and use your own camera and your own voice to share, please do so. Okay, Marie, I saw you raise your hand. Are you done making your first value scale?
Scale, just drawing the grid.
Oh, just drawing the grid. Okay, no problem. I'll give you a few more minutes then.
Okay.
right. Well, if you've finished your first value chart, you can go on to the next one. So my second one actually looks pretty similar to the first one, but the approach I took here was I have all these different pencils. So the first value bar scale that I did, that was all just using a single HB pencil. And this one, I used a different hardness and blackness of pencil for each tint and shade in this value scale. So the darkest one, I used the most pigmented pencil, so the 6B. So means it's the most black and the softest, so it'll transfer the most material, the most pigment to the paper. And then for the lightest, again, I left white, the paper color as the lightest, as the highlight, and then the next tint, the next lightest, I used a 5H pencil, so a very hard pencil that's going to transfer less material to the paper. And so I think that my second scale kind of looks a lot like the first one. You can see that I wasn't quite as careful maybe with blending everything out. You can still see my pencil strokes, but actually pretty happy with them both. So if you've finished your first value scale, you can maybe change your media and work on the second one, or you can do the second one using hatching and cross hatching or stippling little dots. Because we're going to be drawing glass, maybe cross hatching because it gives so much texture might not be the most appropriate. And I'm actually going to, with this in mind, thinking about drawing glass later, for my third value chart, I'm going to think about how, I might want to have contour lines that are following the curves and the reflection of the glass, and how I can kind of create this impression of tints and shades by making my lines just a little darker and a little closer together, but giving this kind of organic wavy form, like the reflections of the light and the shade distorted in the glass. So that's what I'm going to try and do in my third value scale down here. So maybe you want to try something like that, or like concentric circles, just to give, once we start drawing the glass, to get that impression of the smoothness of the glass. Okay, and if you just saw my camera refresh, that's normal. It just needs to refresh the view every half hour. So. Okay, and once more, reminder that I am monitoring the chat on the YouTube and Facebook Live as well. So if there's something that you want me to pay a little more attention to, or you have a comment that you want me to read out, just let me know. And if you're working on a grid or your next value scale using hatching, cross hatching, or these kind of nested lines like I'm doing, one thing that you will probably find pretty helpful is to kind of squint your eyes at it to see, to kind of merge all those lines together and see what effect they are creating of lighter and darker values. Okay, and I've just put my page up on the screen here where I'm really just trying out this idea, this experiment to make my last value scale using some lines that could be contour lines for the glass jar. So, no, I didn't want to do straight hatching and cross hatching because I thought that would just be kind of too textured and not right for glass, which is so smooth. So there we can probably see in comparison to the rest of my value scales there. And actually, I have to say, it looks not bad. Better than I was kind of expecting. I think that these two here These two maybe, these three are maybe a little bit, can use a little bit of work to maybe make this one here a little bit darker. And this one as well. I wasn't very even with my spacing of my lines there. So I think that's actually not bad. And then if you are finished your value scales, even if you've only finished one or two, not all three, I think it's time for us to move on to our still life composition, which you've been staring at the whole time but not drawing. And what I would recommend now is to actually tear your value chart out of your sketchbook so you can kind of easily refer to it as you're going along. Because that's something that you're going to, as you look at the still life that we have set up, you're going to want to kind of be able to kind of compare your value chart with what you're seeing in the image. You might have heard me just tear my value page, my value scales out of my sketchbook there. And I'm going to keep my sheet of copy paper handy as well. So hopefully this is kind of a good setup for everyone. I thought we'd start with just one glass jar on this more or less white background. And yeah, should be in focus. That's about as close as I can get into it. But hopefully you're able to see it all right, especially if you are, well, I guess everyone is joining online, but yeah, hopefully you're able to see it. See the details of it there. Okay, I'm just going to okay, so how I recommend starting this one out is to pencil in what's called a construction line very lightly. So I will just pull up a view of my page again. And so what the construction line will be is just kind of almost basically like a rectangle that you're going to fill in with what we see here, which is the jar. So I can see that the jar is kind of going this direction and that it's a little bit foreshortened. So I'm just going to kind of sketch in kind of lightly like this, where I think I'm going to put the jar on my page, and I think that's a bit fat for the proportion of the jar, so I'm going to just narrow that a little bit. And then once you've got your construction lines in place, and mine are very, rather quite light, is that I'm then going to kind of start to sketch in just the basic shapes of the jar. So I'm going to start with the mouth of the jar, which of course is not going to be round. It's going to be this kind of oval shape. And I'm going to intersect the oval with this construction line right here. And also that construction line is going to help me get this balanced so that this is going right through the center of the oval there. And then there's another ring kind of just below that, the screw rings for the top of the jar, and one below that. And then there's a kind of bulge here. And the bottom of the jar is kind of a slightly different shape. It's a little bit squared off, I think, compared to the top. So I'm going to kind of square it off a little bit on the sides there. And again, try and make it fairly even on both sides. But as you can see, I'm just using short strokes to sketch it in. You can sketch however you like to sketch. And then you can start to add in more of the details here. I'm going to put a little bit of a line here to help me place where these threads are supposed to go in the jar. And then I can see that there's also some threads visible on the other side. So I'm going to put those in, and I can see that this one is really close to the mouth opening of the jar. I'm going to put those in like that. Okay, so this is looking a little bit lopsided to me. I'm just going to try and do a little bit of work to even that out there. And of course, we should all have an eraser handy, but I really recommend having not just the regular gum eraser handy, but the kneadable, soft kneadable eraser, because this will be really good if you drew somewhere and you want to pull the highlight out or pull back the value in that place, that you can just kind of press it in, or you can reshape this so it can be a real precision tool to go in and erase. Okay, and I'm also going to erase my construction lines now because I'm ready to start drawing the values of the jar. And I can also feel a sneeze coming on, so I hope I don't sneeze in your ears. All right. Oh, and I have not taken out my piece of paper to rest my hand on, so maybe I'll do that. Yeah, I think this problem is this construction line was just too angled. It should be a little bit more straight, like that. Straight in, not quite so flared out to the side there. So I think actually all of this I can bring that in quite a bit there. Okay. So I think I need to do some major surgery and corrections here, but that's okay. There, okay, I think that's looking better now. This can still be fixed up a little bit on this side, but I will just keep going and push through. Oh, and I'm using my very darkest pencil right now, which is, oh no, my very lightest pencil, the 5H. So that's kind of a good place to start, maybe, that I'm not going to be putting down so much pigment that it'll be impossible to erase. So now what I would like everyone to do is to locate the highlights on the jar. So I think like right there, I see a highlight, and then here another. This one's quite round and this one's kind of square, and then there's on the inside lip and the outside lip of the jar, there's kind of some long skinny highlights, and just pencil those the outline of those highlights onto your outline of the jar as it is now. So I think that this is kind of maybe about here on the jar. And then this one's really close up here. And even though the jar is rounded up here, I don't see that this is really being distorted. It looks really square there, actually. And then I see this goes onto the thread and also up here. It's a little lighter here, and then it's pretty significant also here. And then I also see over here, there, all the way up to there, I guess. I see the highlights there. And if you are done with the highlights, then I recommend going on to the step, which is looking for the darkest shadow. And generally, the darkest shadow is the cast shadow, and that means the shadow that the light is making, casting from the object. So here, the cast shadow is kind of right underneath the jar and right along this edge of the jar, and also kind of going back along here. And you can see that the cast shadow kind of fades out there, but it's darker when it's closest to the jar. So pencil in those shapes now of the cast shadow, which should be the darkest shadow we see, although I see there's also depths of color within the glass that to me look darker than the cast shadow. And I'm just kind of trailing off my drawing of the cast shadow here because I see it really just kind of gets quite a bit lighter. Okay, and in addition to the cast shadow then, I am going to draw in what I see as really the darkest parts of this jar, which are kind of the edge, the bottom edge of the glass and along the threads. So that's what I'm going to put in next. And I'm actually going to fully kind of fill them in with my pencil as well. So yeah, I see some of these darker areas of the glass right along the threads along the glass top. And I also see these along this bottom edge of the glass. I see just kind of a little bit right in here. And this bottom edge here actually pretty significantly dark. And everyone has their own way they like to draw. I like to draw little short strokes and it looks rather scribbly. It's just how I like to how I like to draw. You can make these strokes any way that you like. And then I can see over here, there's something, I think it must be this glass has like a, this jar has like a pattern embossed on the surface of it. And I think that must be part of the pattern that's kind of picking up the light in a certain way there. And then here, this is very, and I see this little piece coming down like this, a little piece of shadow, and then that kind of connects to this other, again, a bumpy shadow that looks like the edge of this embossed pattern on the glass. And maybe you can take out your value scales at this point and think about how you want, if you want to use any of the value scales that you made to start filling in all of the values and to kind of help you see, again, I recommend kind of squinting. So I can see when I squint at the glass, I see this like kind of funny shape like this here. So I think that seems like a real middle kind of value there. And then I also see a shape that's kind of like this here. And then one, it's maybe, so I'm going to fill these in as kind of a middle value. And even though I said I thought I was going to try and use these kind of contour lines, making them different weights and spacing them closer or further together to kind of convey the smoothness of the glass, I'm like, oh, no, I can't do that. That seems too challenging. So I am going to just shade these in and work on trying to make these ones kind of one of my middle shades here. And I'm using my finger to smooth out the shading that I do for these values, but you can do whatever you like. If you have a paper spindle, or if you want to make one, you can just take some nice soft rag paper and roll it up to make kind of a cone. And you can use that to blend if you don't want to get your finger all dirty like mine. So we'll just keep going along, building up our different values as we see them. And yeah, I want to stress again, like how valuable it can be to just kind of squint at the composition. And I apologize, my camera is just a little bit dark there, and because I'm doing the live video, I can't really adjust the camera on the jar itself. So hopefully I'll figure that out for next time. Okay, so I see up here at this part of the jar, I see a kind of not quite as bright highlight, but I think it's really important for understanding the shape of the jar. It's kind of like this. And so I'm just going to really lightly shade that in, just using actually the leftover pigment that's on my finger from blending some of those other ones. And as I mentioned, this here where I see the embossed glass here, and there's actually a fairly dark shadow on this side. So I'm going to draw that one in now too. And I think these together really help describe, the shape of the jar. And I'm going to choose like something that's quite dark, not quite my darkest value on my value scale, but something that's kind of next to it for this shadow that I'm going to put in now that I see on the right side of the jar. Actually, I'm going to switch to a softer pencil because I do want it to be pretty dark. So I'm using a 5B. And I'm using the side of the pencil that it's not like totally smooth the way that I'm coloring it in. So I'll probably use my finger to blend it a bit. And probably this outside edge, I'll want to use my kneadable eraser or my rubber eraser to just clean that up a bit too. And hopefully you are all busily drawing your values, your shades and tints, and hopefully you can also see. I will send you an email with a photograph of this Once we conclude, if you want to pick this back up, and I know that when we're doing the live streaming, the quality of the video is not as good as when, if we had a recorded video. So you might have some difficulty seeing a lot of the details. So happy to provide that as well. Okay, and yes, here I am smudging in with my trusty finger. And I am actually going to take my value scale out, and I think actually I did a pretty good job getting something that's quite similar to this value here. So I'm actually pretty satisfied with that. And now I'm going to move back to, you can move back and forth however you like. As these things occur to me, I'm just drawing them in. So I see kind of, we drew in these highlights first, and actually I'm going to just maybe pull them out with my kneadable eraser to make sure that they really are just the paper. But I see a next highlighted area is kind of right beside them over a bit. This one has a funny shape, almost looks like an airplane sort of. And then there's one up here kind of parallel to the square that I saw before. That's this kind of also funny shape. So you're really just drawing the outlines of the shades and the highlights that you're seeing. And I see a few down here also. I see one here and here, here. And this isn't exactly what they look like, but it's all going to convey the same idea in the end. And I see there's also a bunch of kind of faint highlights along the screw down or the fastening threads of the jar. And there's some up here too. So I'm just going to pencil those in. And now, again, I'm going to kind of my next level of shading. These are a little lighter. These are lighter here than this highlight here. So I'm going to darken this one just a teensy bit as well. Just that I'm trying to get, if I can, I want to try and get all 8 levels of tint and shade, all 8 values from my value scale in this drawing. And there is also kind of a slightly darker, again, not as dark as over here, but a little bit darker. So I'm just going to shade in here what I think I see along this edge. But it really fades out. This is an interesting one because it just fades out kind of to nothing here, where it really doesn't look much different than that highlight that I had picked out. And in fact, it gets really light right here along the rim of the jar. So I'm just going to put that in very, very lightly there. And I see there's almost this kind of shape coming along here, and this is kind of a medium value here. So I'm going to put that in like that, blend it in a little bit. Oh, and I see on the bottom of the glass, there's also some kind of embossed thing happening down here. There's probably some letters or numbers on it. So I'm going to put those in. And I see there's also, this is a pretty medium to medium dark piece right here that I'm going to draw in. And yeah, I see some really quite light, maybe my second lightest highlight happening right here. And I can see it kind of comes up. And it kind of goes almost over the edge of these highlights that I drew here. Oh, and these are that, also quite light. And I even see these kind of just lighter areas in the middle of the glass. So again, these will be medium. I'll try and make them about the same color as this here. And I kind of like drawing this way where you're just drawing things that are abstract by your observation, and eventually you're kind of building up quite a realistic picture. So I also see there's like kind of another little bit of shade right there that I want to put in. And I can see actually the whole bottom of the jar when I squint at it, there's a little bit more shade on one side than the other. So I'm going to actually do the whole thing very lightly, and then I'm going to describe kind of crescent along the bottom that's a little bit darker. Just really blending it in and building it up. And as I'm looking, I see there's also a couple of spots right up here in this very dark shadow that can actually be deepened. So I'm going to add more there. And also here. And this needs to be a little bit darker in relation to the value that's next to it. And I can see there's also this kind of shape. It's like this here that's coming down that's just a little bit darker than everything else here. So working off of these blobs here that I said they were kind of lighter highlights, I'm going to try and color this in to make it a little bit darker. And yeah, this comes almost all the way around down here. Okay, that's great. So now all the edges of those highlights that I drew have disappeared because now I've been putting in those darker values that really make those highlights kind of pop out right there. So even though I think I didn't draw like the best shape of the jar to begin with, it wasn't like very accurate. It was kind of ugly, to be frank. As you're putting in all the values, you're really, you can really make it come to life and make it be believable. So it's such a valuable thing. And I think I need a little bit more just along this edge here. And yeah, this cast shadow, it's not very dark right along the edge of the jar, but it should be dark almost right here. So I'm going to put in here, very dark. And I'm going to kind of blend that out a little bit too. It's not like a hard line. It's not like we're drawing an outline. It's just where the shadow is deepest is right underneath the jar there. Great. And now here, this part, yeah, getting into some tricky, tricky areas here. I think I need to deepen this shadow for one. I think it's actually quite a lot darker than I put it in as. And it even has some areas that are very deep that I want to kind of join in there. And then this should be just a little bit darker than this highlight that I described here. So I want to kind of get in between this shade and this highlight with the value that I'm doing here. Right. So I see there's kind of, right here, there's a little bit of an area of highlight. So I'm going to try and preserve that, not make it quite as dark as I'm making it here. And then the same thing here. There's this area that's just a little bit lighter. And this can be darkened a little bit here, this other shape that I was drawing in. I'm going to blend that a little bit too. Okay, and I guess I'm ready to move up. So I actually see almost like a straight line coming down like this. So I'm going to add in, and that has some darker shades in it. So I'm going to kind of add those in as well. Kind of one that kind of sits under the lip of the thread here. And then I see it kind of continues on down the jar here. And it kind of cuts into this highlight a little bit. And it tapers off very narrow at the bottom. I'm going to try and give it kind of a triangular wedgy shape there. Okay. Oh, and I see I need to add just a little bit more dark right there. And then the threads, yeah, I think I need to go a kind of medium here and then make it a little darker towards the edges. And then on the left side of the jar, not quite so dark, I think. Right, so hopefully everyone is kind of working about the same pace as me. If I'm holding you up, I apologize. And what's happening here? Okay, so again, I'm just using my finger to put in a kind of lighter value there and just building up, kind of very carefully building up the threads on the glass jar. So there's kind of, along the top of the thread, there is definitely an area that's a little bit darker. So that's what I'm going to kind of work on defining here. And then if I look at the inside of the jar, I can see that these threads on the inside are actually quite dark. So I'm going to think about maybe my second darkest value a little bit there. And there's also, there's a fleck of paint on the jar that is kind of falling right about here. So I'm just going to draw that in really dark. And then I can see along the threads here, and there's also a, looks like a highlight, maybe it's a piece of white paint, hard to say. And this is actually quite light towards these corners of the threads here. And this is, again, rather quite light here. So I'm going to just describe that as an area that's a little bit lighter than the rest of what is happening in here. You can see this is darker edge again to the thread here going up. And then this is all pretty evenly a lighter shade in there, and then there's another ring, I'm guessing, of threads here, but quite a strong highlight. I'm actually going to, again, take my kneadable eraser and go in here and pull this highlight up because it's very bright when I'm looking at the image, especially quite bright. And I'm just gonna, on my computer here, flip back to our Facebook and see if there's anything there. Okay, nope, I'm not seeing any comments there, but you can make them as we go along. All right, where am I? I'm finishing off the top threads of the jar here. They're pretty dark. So I'm going to kind of also try and get really crisp on this, the edge of this square of light that I'm seeing. So that it looks like it's really reflective. And a kind of, and I can also see there's almost like bands of darkness coming up here as well, along this part of the mouth. I see like a dark part and a dark part. So I'm going to draw those in as well. Just a little bit darker in some of these places. Better define those rings. Okay, well, I think, yeah, I feel like I'm mostly done. I'm just going to put in some of these lighter shadows that I can see also in the background. They're very, very light. And then I'll probably go in with my kneadable eraser and just kind of add a little bit of highlights where I think that some of this needs to be pulled back. And I'll also just kind of put in this cast shadow underneath here where we are seeing it. And I can also see this is just a little bit darker on here and right here, a little bit darker. And here. And it's not surprising to me that the shadow is like very uneven with areas of light because there's going to be reflected light that's kind of shining through the glass and actually washing out the shadow in certain areas. And then I'm going to take my kneadable eraser and pull out my highlights here too. So if we can remember back to the very first highlights, I thought that that was really the brightest highlight. These ones here are pretty close behind. Those very bright highlights. I'm going to pull those out with my kneadable eraser. This one's pretty bright. This one's pretty bright. It's a little bit less, but might need a little defining there. So if it's gotten a little bit mushy around the edges of the highlight too, I might want to pull it out with my kneadable eraser. And there might be even more of an area of highlight right on the bottom of the jar there. And then this is not quite, you can see here, so I'm going to darken a little bit here because this value should be lighter than this value. So I'm going to darken it up a little bit in there just to define that highlight a little bit more. So honestly, I think my jar is looking a little bit psychedelic. But I hope that you are all happy with what you're seeing from your drawings. But what I am seeing is, yeah, lots of really defined areas of highlight and shadow. And I think I did a pretty good job of getting as I had hoped to do all 8 of my values in there. So I'll give everyone a few more minutes to work on this. And actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a picture and I'm going to put it up on the screen while I set up our next still life. And yeah, while I think it's challenging and kind of a fun challenge to use like a dry drawing media to draw the transparent glass, I think this seems something to me that would be like natural and beautiful using wet media like watercolor or ink washes. So, you know, for the next still life that I set up, feel free to change the media that you're using. Okay, and I'm just waiting for my photograph of the jar to upload. And when it has, I will happily put that up on the screen. And it actually, I might do that for the next one as well, because I think it maybe shows you a little bit better than my live camera view, even though I have my like fancy DSLR setup and it's a live streaming video of the still life. I think actually the photograph will often show you a lot more detail than you're seeing from the camera view. Okay, so this is a little bit of a heads up that our next composition is coming up. You see I put it on the side of the screen there. And it looks like this one, hopefully it looks a little bit brighter, but I will take a photograph as well. So if that ends up being more valuable for everyone, I can do that. And I think I will also change up the position of the lighting for this composition as well. So I think I will maybe try and give us a stronger light from the side. Yeah, I think so. Maybe I'll stick this guy back here. Okay, great. So hopefully everyone is ready, but like I said, if you're not quite ready to switch still life compositions, I will send everyone that photograph of the jar there so you can continue on with your drawing of the jar a little bit later. And I've also got a photograph of the new composition is using all this colored glass, and like I said, I made a stronger light coming from this side. Oh, see my stream frozen for a second there. I made a stronger light coming from the left side, so you should be able to see lots of highlights and some kind of scattered light, including there's a really interesting piece of light that's coming through this clear glass jar with the moss ball in it. So I think this would be a really exciting composition to draw. And of course, feel free to kind of change up your drawing media. If you like, I'm going to stick with pencil, even though these are colored. As I mentioned a little bit earlier, it can be challenging to kind of think about what are the relative values of these colors, but certainly we can see that, you know, this turquoise is lighter than the red, and the purple is in fact a lighter value than the green jar right beside it, although maybe just marginally. So yeah, wonderful challenge. So let's start off again doing the same thing. We'll do our construction lines, and I'm just going to put I'm just going to put my other camera in place there so you can follow along with my drawing if you wish. Okay, there we are. So let me move to a fresh page. And to get all set up here. Okay. So the same thing, I'm going to take a lighter pencil. Oh yes, my 5H, that's a nice light pencil. And yeah, actually there's so much in this composition, so it will be a real challenge for me to get it all in, but I do like that. So I'm going to start with construction lines, and I think somehow it's going to help me to put this little pedestal that these glass items are sitting on first. And then I'm going to kind of sketch in where that overturned votive is. And then here, this guy here. So you can see, maybe you can see, these are pretty light lines, so maybe you can't. So I've drawn kind of a rectangle where this rounded jar is, and then I've just kind of placed these kind of bumps on the side. Sorry, I don't know where my camera is. It's hard for me to judge here. It's like trying to look in a mirror. So there we go. So I'm really not trying to be accurate with the shapes with my construction line, but just trying to kind of place everything where it's going to need to go within the composition. Okay, so there I can also see, okay, we're going to have the lid on that. And back here, there's another one. It's a little bit taller almost. And down below, almost to the level of this blue votive, we have this blue jar, this blue bottle that's quite tall. And that's kind of all that I can see of it. So then I'm going to go over here and I'm going to kind of draw the opening of this kind of blue lantern shape over here. Kind of get that more or less in. And I can see there's another one of these lidded jars in behind. And then there's this. Okay. And then I'm also kind of checking like how do things line up. So right now I'm drawing the clear jar with the moss ball, and it almost lines up with this votive candle here. So I'm actually going to move it over a little bit there just to try and make sure that I have it lined up. And the bottom of that glass jar comes a little bit below this blue glass lantern here. And I can see that the shape of it is a little bit like this. And the moss ball is right there. And there's a lid to this jar, maybe right about here. And, you know, the great thing about the construction lines, it can kind of help you get everything into your composition. Okay, I can see that this little turquoise bottle almost comes up to the acrylic shelf here. So I'll get that in, and then the bottom of that bottle is kind of around the bottom of the moss ball here. So I know where that's going to go. And then there's this green bottle, which is actually kind of dark against the dark turquoise bottle behind it. So hopefully I can kind of figure out where to put everything there. And in front of that is this purple bottle, and I can see the mess just touching the lid that's lying on the ground. So I'll sketch that in. And that. And then this bottle has like a real complicated shape. Okay, so I've got my construction lines in, and now we'll kind of do the same thing as we did with the last one. We've got about half an hour, so not a huge amount of time. So we're gonna actually have to be like way faster with this one than the other one. The previous one, but of course, like I said, I will include photographs for you. I'll send them out by the email, and maybe I'll include them on our Art Gallery of Regina.ca workshops and classes page, so you can see them on our website as well if that's a little easier than receiving the email. But yeah, let's go ahead and once again, we'll look for the highlights, the brightest highlights. Oh, actually, sorry, I'm going to maybe go in and do a little bit of work on the shapes of these. So especially like up here, this I didn't do a very thorough job. So although I think also that these shapes are going to come as we put in the shadows and the highlights. So one of the strongest highlights I see is on the clear glass jar with the moss ball. So I'll draw that one in. And there's another big hot highlight right up here on the red jar. And then it kind of comes out like that as well. Actually, there's a lot, obviously. Unsurprisingly, there's a lot of highlights on that red jar because it's very close to the light source. So I'm going to actually draw these all in because I see them, quite a lot of them. I don't really see a lot of strong highlights on this pink lantern up there. I see just a little, you know, kind of a medium-ish highlight there. And this votive candle holder here is really tricky because it's all kind of diamond shapes that are kind of at different angles, so we'll be reflecting the light in different ways. So I don't see much highlight. I really only see one highlight that's kind of about there. And actually this blue bottle has quite a lot of highlight on it. So I see a little bit of highlight there and then coming almost down the entire side. I'll draw that in. I see a little bit of highlight on the top of this purple jar. It's coming in from the window on the other side. So that's not quite as strong a highlight. And I see some little highlights on the green jar as well, so I'll draw those in. It's a bit of a highlight on the dark turquoise jar from the window there, and then one up here, probably from our light source. And I do see some highlights as well on this dark blue jar in the background with the lid on. So I will draw those in as well. And yeah, once again, I don't really see any highlights on this lantern, but I think I'll draw in the handle just to kind of help me place things. So it looks like the handle kind of comes down like that. All right. And then we want to look for our cast shadows. And I was saying what's really interesting here is that you're seeing like some reflected light, and there's colored shadows. There's this beautiful purple shadow in front of the purple jar, and I can see a kind of deeper shadow along that edge. And along the bottom of the lantern is quite dark there, and then there's a really interesting shadow that starts dark and gets lighter. Yeah, so I don't see a lot of cast shadows in here, but maybe, again, there's some right underneath this purple jar, the edge of the purple jar. And I think this Art Gallery of Regina might be covering up a little bit the bottom of that. The bottom of the clear jar with the moss ball in it. So let's see if I can add another image for you. So that you can get that. Yeah, and I guess some more, you know, kind of darker areas that I'm seeing that are not the cast shadows, but pretty dark. The bottom of this votive candle is actually pretty dark. I'm going to switch that in, and I can use kind of my second dark value to get that in. And also on the kind of just in front of the highlight on the red glass jar, there is also a very strong shadow there that I'm going to put in. And again, I'm putting down that piece of smooth copy paper to kind of mitigate the effect of dragging my hand over my drawing and smearing my drawing medium. And this is actually extremely dark at the top of the jar. But what I think is great is I didn't do a really good job like kind of outlining the items and describing their shapes. I really just put in my construction lines, but you know, when you start to put in these different areas you see of shade and highlight, it really helps you describe the shape much more effectively. In fact, there's something really interesting. This jar is like kind of both rounded and squared. And I can see that there's this kind of dark medium shadow that kind of looks like this on the side that kind of tells us, you know, that this is a kind of flattened round surface here. And then actually I'm going to make sure that kind of correct there, and it's pretty dark along the bottom like that there too. Okay, actually I feel like I could just work on this red jar right now because there's a lot happening. It's pretty interesting, pretty rich. You know, I see these dark shadows coming in on this side, really kind of describing the shape. And then I actually see this band of highlight here that's the bottom of the votive candle, the turquoise votive candle. And then there's actually a kind of medium-ish highlight in the corner here, so I'm not going to color that quite as darkly. And I also see this kind of funny little medium highlight right here as well. Kind of butts right against this area that's a fairly dark shadow. I'm going to darken that one, and I'm going to put that one in kind of medium. And then I'm going to have to go a little bit darker, I think, with everything. I'm going to darken where I see a very dark line on the left edge. It kind of really makes those highlights seem all that brighter in comparison. And see there's this kind of little blob that's kind of not quite as dark as the rest. And it's kind of a lighter area right here as well, butting up against that dark shadow. And I'm going to try and get something that's kind of a darkish, you know, this is quite a dark red, this jar. So I'm going to try and get kind of darker when I'm filling in these areas here. I wonder if you can hear my pencil scraping against the paper. It's such a beautiful sound. That's something so nice when we can draw together and hear everyone's pencil scraping against their paper. Okay, and now that I've put that in, I can see that this still isn't dark enough, so I'm going to darken that up a bit. And I think that is dark enough over there. And then up here, yeah, this maybe needs to be a little bit darker. All right. It's a little bit darker around the middle of the lid than the sides of the lid of this jar. And then these highlights aren't quite the brightest highlights here. And even here, these ones here, not quite the brightest. So I'm going to take them down a little bit. actually, I think that's looking pretty good or not bad. There we go. Okay, I think you can see now that jar there. So this votive candle, I think, is going to be extremely challenging to draw, but I'm going to go on to that one next and kind of go about it the same way. There aren't a lot of highlights to see. I see one here, and I see another one here. And then I do see this like quite dark shape down here, so I'm really going to try and define this shape and make it very dark. Actually, I'm using a 4H pencil, so I might even want to switch up and use like a 5B so that it can be, I'm just going to lay down that much more pigment on my paper and get that really dark. And up here at the top of this, okay, just kind of looking at my construction lines here, and I can see that I had made this pink glass doesn't actually extend beyond the top of the votive candle holder. So I'm going to make sure that, that doesn't happen. I don't draw it so inaccurately, so I'm just going to erase that. Okay. And I'm even going to use the top of my page here. I just want to get the edge of the votive candle holder quite straight. There we go. Okay, so I've drawn in some highlights and some shadows as I see them. And this jar that's in behind, I can actually see that it looks can kind of see where it's kind of making a darker shape behind the votive candle about there. So that's where I'm going to kind of place one of my construction lines, so I just kind of know what's happening there. And I'm also going to draw the handle for this jar there. Okay, and I saw a highlight, thought I saw a highlight along the top edge of this jar. Just like that, draw that in. And like I said, this is made of these kind of repeating diamond shape, where all of these repeating diamond shapes, and they're all kind of at different angles, so reflecting the light differently. So I'm actually going to put up photograph here for us to look at, and that might help with those kind of tricky angles and stuff that we are seeing there. So give me a minute. It's going to take a bit for this image to upload. There we go. Okay, yeah, that's just going to take a second there, but I think it's going to be really helpful to just really see a little bit more detail on that votive candle. So for now, I'm just going to start sketching in. There's actually not a huge amount of tonal variation on the pink jar that's in behind, but I can see it's a bit darker on the left-hand side. There's this dark spot right along the top edge of the lip of the jar. And a little bit here, just describing where the lip of the jar meets the body. And a little bit darker also along here. And I'm going to do this like kind of little dots going my drawing there, just to kind of mimic the texture of that jar. And again, here I can see there's actually quite a dark piece on the right-hand side there underneath the lip of the jar and along here. So again, I'm gonna draw kind of the shape of this, but then I'm gonna put it in using these kind of big dots, like I said, to kind of replicate the texture of the jar. And I see there's a little bit of darker area right along the top of the jar. I'm just going to fill it all in. A kind of a medium, lightish value here. And use that as a jumping off point to put in some areas that are darker. Those highlights look pretty good, but I'm going to pull them out a little bit. And indeed, just draw a few more dots. Actually, maybe I'll just draw like kind of shade underneath the circle of these dots. Again, to give this idea of like the texture. And so there, that's when I'm saying I'm making this kind of texture with dots. That's what I mean, that I've been drawing these kind of little circles there to try and show the texture of that jar in behind. And there is actually, I would say, I'd almost kind of describe it as kind of a circle of, or a triangle, I mean, of highlight cutting along the middle of this jar, coming to a point towards the lip. So I'm just going to kind of pencil that in, and then I'm going to take my kneadable eraser, and I'm just going to lift out a little bit, and I'm kind of like going to stipple in there. So it is just lifting a little bit. So overall, it should be a pretty subtle effect, actually. And I can also see that on the left hand of the jar, there is actually quite a bit of shadow. So I'm going to just evenly shade that in and then bring out the texture again with those little circles that I was drawing. And the same thing on the right side of the jar. I can see that there's actually quite a bit of darkening that I could do along there. Will really make it pop out. And here we go. So there's a photograph, and you can really see from the photograph, I think, all of these shadows and highlights, and especially that shape of the votive candle. Really complicated. So I'm thinking I might start by kind of going kind of around the middle quite lightly. And I can see there's one kind of diamond shape that seems to be pretty prevalent. And then I'll use that as where I'm going to work off from. Just really lightly sketching in those diamond shapes there, the same way that I've done the construction lines for the overall composition of all of these different various pieces of glass. All right. And then, yeah, I can really see the highlights really well in the photograph. So I'm just going to kind of draw in some more highlights. As I see them, there's, yeah, kind of like 3 triangles on the top left of that votive candle holder. So I'm going to draw those in. Triangles are kind of chevron shapes. And then this one, I couldn't really make sense of it when I was looking at the live video view, but I see it actually looks more like that. And I can also see, which I couldn't see in the live view, actually the shape of the top of this votive candle holder. So I'm just going to also sketch that in. As well. Oh yeah, and there's like a big, actually a big highlight somehow that I couldn't see before. So I'm gonna lift out here where I colored in so dark at the bottom there. Oh, nice. Much better. And because of the shape of the this still life composition, or all of the shape of this votive candle holder with all of these sharp edges, I want to also have all of my highlights and shadows retain their sharp edges. So I'm going to start, actually, I've kind of sketched in a bunch of oh no, sorry. Getting confused about what I'm doing here. Okay, so I guess you can only see my sketchbook on the side here. So what I've done is I've added like lots of little lines there where I see the highlights, and I've sketched in the top of this votive candle holder. And now I'm going to start drawing in some of the shadows that I see, including where we see the kind of pink jar in behind this blue votive candle holder, or turquoise votive candle holder. Yeah, so I'm going to start filling in that way. And I suspect, oh yeah, we're really close to the end here. So I think that's probably where I'm going to end up leaving this composition for today, is just having drawn these 3 jars here. Yeah, I hope that both you share your drawings with me and with the AGR, and that you had a nice time. And Marie, as I mentioned, is in the studio. So Marie, if you want to put your sketchbook up on screen, either the first drawing that we did or the next one, just hold it up and I will add you.
2. Okay. There is the first one.
Sorry, I had my microphone off.
Oh, okay.
I don't know if you could hear me, but what did you think of drawing the clear glass? Was it a big challenge?
It was, because sometimes I didn't realize how dark things should be till I compared things to the highlights. So yes, values really, really tricky, but interesting with something like that. And it was much better when you put the photograph up. The live image was very, very hard to see any detail. So I appreciated having that photo up. But yeah, very, very interesting and definitely challenging. And then didn't get too far with this one, but decided to throw in some watercolor, which sort of speeds things up a little bit.
Yeah.
And so the dark parts are Conte. I did do the construction drawing with pencil and then put in the dark parts with Conte, and then started with some watercolor.
Oh, so, fantastic.
I'm looking forward. Thank you. I'm looking forward to having the photo reference to more on it, because it was fun.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll put those photographs up right away and email them out to people right away as well.
Thank you. Thank you for doing this so much, Sandy.
Oh, yeah, you're very welcome. Well, thanks for joining. It's great to see all your artwork in the background too, Marie. Yeah, so I'm going to just finish off. We've got 6 more minutes, so I'm going to put up our drawing again, or sorry, our photograph again. And everyone can keep drawing for maybe the next 6 minutes. So there we go. I just wanted to mute that. I wonder, you still hear me, Marie? If you give me a thumbs up. Yes, okay, great. I'm switching between two cameras here and it gets confusing for me. Yeah, so I'm just gonna kind of finish up kind of on this votive candle holder here, getting as many of these diamonds in as I can over the remaining few minutes of our Still Life Sunday on February 27th. Oh yeah, I see like a real dark bit on the top. Yeah, so much more detail on the photograph. So I think that's what I'll be doing from now on. I thought maybe it's good for me to have the live stream, or the live video image, but I think actually this works a lot better. So, and actually this is quite light here, so I'm going to pull that back with my kneadable eraser. It's funny how sometimes you can just get it really into like the little details there. So just doing in the top of that jar there, and see that there's actually some nice highlights in the lip of the jar. And just trying to keep all those highlights intact as I'm also trying to draw in kind of where I see the bottom of that pink glass. It's so hard. I have only myself to blame for choosing such a challenging thing as this faceted votive holder. Okay, and I can see that there's actually a fair amount of probably cast shadow right underneath this jar, so I'm going to draw that in. And actually, I think not bad. So yeah, what time is it? 3:58, 2 minutes. Okay, I have some time to keep going. And also with this picture, you can really see, I think, the things I was talking about, like the texture of this other votive, or this other candle holder behind, where it's got this kind of pebbled glass texture. And actually in the photograph, I can see all of the round pieces on the side. So I'm just going to kind of draw those in for myself. And I see that there's a bunch of areas that I need to darken in here as well. So I'll do that. And some of these highlights are not as bright as others, so I can see like so I'll still keep them light, but I'm going to darken them a little bit. And then I can also see that a lot of these dark areas I need to darken as well. So I'll get in there and really darken here. And also kind of sharpen up the edges of these facets. Okay, well, I think that my drawing is not perfect, not by a long shot, but I'm kind of happy with being able to kind of get those three things in there. And I think what is successful is giving this effect of, you know, light and shadow and luminescence. So I'm pretty happy with that. Wow, that faceted votive candle is like so challenging. But yeah, there we go. So once again, I want to thank you for joining me and the Art Gallery of Regina for our free online program, Still Life Sundays. Next month, March, we won't be doing Still Life Sunday on the last Sunday of the month because we will be running a workshop with an artist who will be exhibiting in our main gallery, Nikki Middlemiss, and she'll be leading a workshop called Let Your Materials Guide You in English and in French here on site at the gallery 2420 Elphinstone Street. So it'll be a bilingual workshop, English and French, and also hybrid. So you can join us here or you can join us online, and it's free to tune in. It'll be on Facebook Live and YouTube Live, just like this video. But we will also, if you want to register on our website, artgalleryofregina.ca, or on Eventbrite, you can pay $10 and we'll supply you the materials to pick up the week before if you're joining us online for Nikki's workshop. So that will be on March 20th, 2 days after her two-person exhibition, Elevate and Hold On, opens with Moose Jaw artist Peter Tucker in our main gallery here at the Art Gallery of Regina. So I urge you to visit our website for more information and to join us next month when Nikki Middlemiss will be leading a more formal workshop, I think. Well, a very experimental workshop. And then we'll resume our Still Life Sunday programming in April, and either led by one of our staff people, that would be me, Sandy, I'm the curator here, or Jess, our director, or one of our volunteer board members, because we are a nonprofit art gallery, so our board members are all volunteers. Let me know if there's anything you want to see next time or concentrate on and share. And I see Marie popped a message in saying thank you. So thank you for joining, Marie. And thank you everyone who's watching on Facebook Live and YouTube Live. And I'm going to sign off now. So thanks again.